Hey guys, so we've got a new dev diary by CA for Total War Pharaoh. There's a lot here that's quite interesting and other things that I think are kind of a missed opportunity, I guess. So I thought in today's video, again, we'd do a bit of an analysis, opinion video on what CA are doing here in this first developer diary. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's dive straight in. So in this first section of the video, what we're talking about here is the new Outpost mechanic in Pharaoh. Now, disclaimer, of course, this isn't new. They're bringing back the old watchtower and fort system from Rome Total War and Medieval 2. But the difference is here, you can't split off armies into generalist armies, and you can't just dynamically, flexibly have these outposts built wherever you want. There are set outposts in set places around your regions, right? And you have to strategically decide how you want to build these outposts up, depending on what the region and the province is for, economical, religious, kind of public order, or building a fort for a defensive position, right? And the biggest difference here is you can actually, they're bringing this back, which is really cool. You can have this 20 stack move to the defensive fort you've built here, which has a general stationed in it by default, by the way, which is interesting. And you can move units out of this 20 stack into this fort as a kind of defensive stationary army. So in a way, they are bringing back the fort mechanic from older games in a very kind of flexible, kind of rigid way, which I think for me is a missed opportunity. But in this first section of the video, I just wanted to comment on this. If only CA just, I get why you wouldn't have generalist armies anymore, but I don't really get why you couldn't have a general go into a completely, interesting part of the region where you think a defensive fort could be built, and built that dynamically, flexibly. Why couldn't you have generals build these things wherever you wanted in these regions? So that's the only kind of complaint I have with this mechanic. Otherwise, I think it's really nice to see this come back. Now, in this next section of the video, we're talking about matched combat animation, which is great. It's coming back. But what we're talking about here really is that it's going to be weapon specific. And what I mean by that and what they're talking about is the fact that if a unit is wielding a spear, for example, and attacking another unit with a spear, the AI, the system isn't going to be randomly generating an animation from a library of hundreds of animations. It's going to be picking specific animations for that weapon. So you're going to have a spear unit that's going to be using a spear animation versus another spear unit. You're going to have axes that are not going to be thrusting forward like it's a sword in previous games. You're going to be axes swinging all the time, hitting with a swing. That's the point here, which is a really, really great thing. We haven't seen this system in a very long time. I want to say since like OG Medieval or Rome. It's been a very long time. So it's really great to see this come back. My only worry with this is the variety of animations per type of unit. If we're talking like, these spear units only have a choice of 2, 3, 4 animations to choose from in their battles, that's kind of on the low side, in my opinion. If it's closer to a dozen, then we're going to have a very, very immersive, enjoyable time when it comes to zooming in close to your battles and having a look at these animations firsthand. So that's what I'm hoping for. Let's see what happens when we get more details about these unit specific animations. Now, in this next section of the video, we're talking about sieges, and specifically victory points and the siege equipment, right? So victory points are back. They're brought back from Shogun 2 Total War, in which you could play a multiplayer battle and capture various points in the field and get buffs, to your army, or debuffs to the enemy. That same kind of mechanic is being brought back here in the siege battles in Pharaoh, with the kind of main difference being when you capture all of these points, you incur a massive battlefield-wide morale debuff to the enemy, and that kind of represents you capturing the entirety of the city, causing huge demotivation to the enemy and their will to fight, continue the siege, which I totally get. I think that combined with, being able to burn down buildings and cities and, various different elements of demotivating your enemy is quite a cool way to evolve, if not just at the very least bring back mechanics that we've seen in previous historical games. Now, the only thing that I want to comment on here that I'm not a big fan of is the fact that, yes, they're bringing back siege equipment, ladders, and sappers especially, but What isn't great here is that sapping in particular is going to be happening before you fight the battle. So you'll have your sappers built up. They will sap essentially specific walls in the battlefield. I'm not sure how you get to choose that at the moment, but that's not going to be something that happens in real time in your battles, which I think is, again, another missed opportunity. Why don't you bring that back and improve on it? Because it did work in Rome Total War, but it could have been better. So yeah, that's just one comment I wanted to add here in terms of sapping coming back and not being quite the way it was done before, which, yeah, is a bit of a missed opportunity. They do go into, burning cities, burning down settlements, and the more you burn, the higher the repair bill you're going to get after the battle, which again is a returning feature. So yeah, I guess it's interesting to see all this come back. It's just it's done in a limited way, I guess is what I'm trying to say, which is a shame. Now, in this next section of the video, we're talking specifically about this cultural, political mechanic in which you can gain legitimacy, raise your kind of like authority within your culture, and challenge the Pharaoh or the equivalent king and the Hittites and the Canaanites to become the new cultural leader of your faction, which is great. I mean, it's a civil war mechanic that we saw in older games like Rome 2, Attila, etc., brought back in a way that is much more engaging and actually is a proper element of your early game, right? In the middle game, you'll be kind of like consolidating your power, preparing, I guess, late game for the sea peoples. That's my impression anyway. But in this early game, you're going to be playing this kind of political power grabbing, this kind of like game within a game to rise up and become the new faction leader of your kingdom. So that's a very cool thing. They go into the various elements of how you can do that by capturing wonders, specific cities that are high in legitimacy, by building monuments and wearing crowns of certain regions, etc. All of that is really good. I don't have too much to comment on in this section, really. I think everything that they've talked about here in terms of Civil War, bringing it back in a much more engaging way, is very, very good. So I'm just going to say, great, CA, well done. I'm very excited to see more about the Civil War mechanic in Total War Pharaoh. Finally, guys, in this last section of the video, CA devs are diving into character progression and faction leader development, and specifically, if I take a pause here, you can see that they've replaced the skill tree with competencies, and they've added various elements that are fairly new, but they're kind of weaving in these things from games like Troy, Three Kingdoms, and Warhammer, right? So just to very quickly explain it, you spend your competency points in a various line, maybe for campaign movement, which is Ardor here, this third one. That leads to various titles that you can unlock here that help with buffs to your army, to your region, public order, whatever, which you can assign depending on the various situations that you get into. And all of that leads to unlocking equipment as well that you can assign to your faction leader. And what that does especially is affect your bodyguard unit. So you can assign a spear, for example, to your faction leader, which will make your bodyguard wield spears versus maybe what it was wielding before, swords or axes. You could have an enemy army approaching you that is quite fast. They have high speed units, and the enemy faction leader's bodyguard unit is a fast armored unit, right? Maybe what you want to do in that situation is equip the chariot mount with a bow as an equipment here, essentially making your bodyguard unit a mobile kind of faster than the enemy ranged unit, which again is responding to that kind of situation. So all of this kind of weaving into each other to create a very dynamic, flexible faction leader that with time can respond to different situations in different ways, right? The final thing I wanted to talk about here is that CA is bringing back traits and ancillaries, right? We just talked about ancillaries with the equipment that we've got, the various weapons and mounts, etc. But traits is something that's going to be quite unique to the kind of character that you're developing. If you're developing a warlike Hittite character that's brutal in battle, you know, he might get the cruel trait. It's very likely through his campaign, but he won't get the merciful trait. So there's this kind of dynamic trait system that's coming back alongside with your character development that I really, really appreciate. It's present in other games in the series as well, but it's nice to see it come back in Total War Pharaoh also. And that's pretty much it for today, guys. We've gone through a variety of mechanics in this dev diary from CA, which I really appreciate. It's really nice to see them go through dev diaries again in a way that is engaging. I prefer also like a text dev diary, maybe a blog, not to complain. I do appreciate them doing this, but this is still a nice way of showing the various mechanics, the design thought that's going into, matched combat and making it weapon specific, outposts, and the various, defensive capabilities of forts and how you can muster units to put them back in there, and especially the whole like trait system, the ancillaries, the ability to edit the kind of bodyguard that you get in a way that's much more evolved and interesting compared to Troy, where you just kind of unlock them through skill trees. So some really good stuff here. I obviously I'm not happy about some things like the sappers obviously not being present in your battles in real time, or the fact that outposts are not as flexible and dynamic as we've seen before. Some of this is quite limited to how it's been done in previous historical games, but a lot of it is very welcome. It's nice to see a lot of this come back. We have to appreciate the fact that we as a community have been asking for a lot of this to come back in a new historical game for a long time. So some of this is happening, which is great to see, and I really appreciate it. And that's going to be it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. If you did, do give it a like, drop any thoughts or questions in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel for more Total War content, gameplay, and news just like this. And thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.